feelings. You're in your feelings, and it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. You are in your feelings, man.
The new dude, the fucking Civil Rights Act. So much shit has happened in between with those parties that their ideology changed. You're stupid.
So what has the Democrats brought for you? Let me know what they have done for you. What they have done to bring black people out of poverty. Let me know. But if you don't vote for me, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. Other than that. And then when he did become president, he wrote executive orders for Pacific Islanders, right? For shit that they went through for 2 years.
Pacific Islander.
Yes, he did. In 2020, because of the pandemic, rolled back in orders of fucking executives. It was for Asians. It was for Asians. It was for Asians and Pacific Islanders.
No, you can't do any type.
Are you ignorant? Are you ignorant?
You don't know what you're talking about. So you are a dusty. Because you don't read.
My goodness. All right, hold on. Let me pull it up. Let me pull it up.
I know what the fuck you're talking about.
No, you don't.
Pacific Islanders.
Read it verbatim so we can understand its comprehension. Read it verbatim.
President Biden's Executive Order 14031 established a federal integrity working group as part of the White House Initiative on Asian American, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. That's just one thing, again, to what's the word I want to use? To cater to a certain community. Meanwhile, the community.
Can you read it and not editorialize?
Okay, let me find an actual.
His fingers gonna get tired.
So hold on right here.
You cannot write any type of legislation.
Alright, so here we go. Executive Order on Advancing Equity, Justice, and Opportunity for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1, Policy, Asian American, Native Hawaii, and Pacific Islanders, individuals, and communities are irrefutable sources of our nation's strength. These communities have molded American experiences, yada, 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 the richness of America's...
You can't do the yada, yada.
Are you guys going to really sit here and all right. So these communities have molded American experience, and the achievements of AA and NHPI communities make the United States stronger and more vibrant. The richness of America's multicultural democracy is strengthened by the diversities of AA and NHPI communities and the many cultures and languages of Asian Americans and NHPI individuals in the United States. Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities together constitute the fastest growing ethnic group in the United States and make rich contributions to our society, our economy, and our culture. Yet, for so long, systematic barriers, right? Forget about black people. Systematic barriers to equity, justice, and opportunity put the American dream out of reach of many Asian Americans and NHPI communities. Many Asian Americans and NHPI individuals face persistent disparities in socioeconomic health and educational outcomes. Linguistic isolation and lack of access to language assistance services continue to lock many Asian Americans individuals out of opportunity. Too often, federal data collection practices fail to measure, reflect, and desegregate the diversity of Asian Americans. These practices contribute to often painful and enduring stereotypes about Asian Americans as a model minority and obscure disparities within Asian Americans. So now I'm going to fast forward to this bill that, again, President Advisory Commission of Asian Americans. There is established in the Department of Health and Human Services the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans. The commission shall be led by 2 chairs. The development, monitoring, yada, yada, yada. This, I don't know, just do this whole thing. I just need to get to. All right, so here we go. The initiative shall advance these efforts, identify and eliminate any existing institutional policies or barriers within federal programs, improve safety, access to justice, and violence prevention for Asian Americans, including by preventing, reporting, addressing, and better tracking acts of hate and bias, promote inclusion expanding public education and knowledge of Asian Americans. Wow, that sounds like when Black people asked for the same thing, critical race theory, it was a big issue. But for Asian Americans, guess what? It's okay.
Yes,
Expand the collection and use.
so sad. Like
My comprehension is.
It's a commission. He did an EO for a commission, for a study, because it's been left out of the data. That was for legislation.
No, it was a separate article.
You just read it. I interpreted what you just read.
No, that was a separate article.
You
I
was given a
changed the article.
commission. Okay, all right.
I don't know what's going on here. You can't write legislation for a specific race. When he did that executive order was putting together a group, right? It was a group to study what the fuck was going on in that community. That's it. It was a group. They have a bunch of groups for each of these communities. We have one for our community. What's going on here? This shit is about civil rights and anti-hate. That's it. And if you actually look at the legislation that they did pass, that they used the word Asian in, it addressed everyone. It wasn't just for them.
So anti-hate is not something that doesn't affect Black communities.
Use another nigga on the app. That's all you are.
I don't want to be the nigga on that. That's a problem. You want to be. You want to be a bitch on the app, not me.
You don't read and you can't comprehend.
You want to be a bitch on the app, not me.
Until you have
Yeah. Hey, you gotta go to the bitch part, bro? Nah. Really? Come on. Why the shots call me a nigga? I have not used that word at all. Bullshit. Nah, you good?
But she didn't call you out your name.
I called you what you want.
Hey, ML.
You're gonna have to find people.
Good to see you. We haven't seen you in place in a while. You have
I was
this cool.
on vacation and
You failed.
need your break.
You failed. Period.
I failed.
Mm-hmm.
This is really weird. People don't even understand. Like, people come up on this rich guy that just came off the fucking stage that you put in the go. This rich guy that's so well read doesn't understand fucking simple fucking legislation or executive orders or what the executive order was for. Something's wrong. Like, something's seriously wrong with fucking Americans. Because every one of y'all that come up here that's fucking MAGA or says you don't want to vote or says dumb shit like I vote for the terrorists I know or the racists I know, a whole Black woman, the racists I know, y'all are crazy. Your mother should have squeezed the legs when you was coming out.
Or she should have swallowed before she was getting fucked.
Swallow. There you go.
Wipe that ass on a napkin.
Hey, yo, ML.
What I don't understand. Can you hear me back?
Well, they were
This is the first time I heard you. Can y'all hear me?
yes, we can. Something.
Okay. Thank you. What I don't understand is why these MAGAs are so geeked to be part of a party that kicked their Black asses out 50 years ago. I don't understand. They literally, when it was the Black People's Party, they literally turned around and said, we don't want y'all. So I don't understand why they going so hard for the fucking MAGAs. I don't get it.
That's something we'll never get.
That's just...
Democrats have to be Democrats have to do everything perfect, otherwise we're punish or dry. That's it. I mean, he said it. It's like if he doesn't get every single thing that he wants, then fuck us, we ain't shit. That's basically what he said. He wants 10 things, we gotta give him the 10 things. If we give him 8, he's rather just vote for anarchy.
And I don't understand why. I get the Palestinian thing, the Gaza thing, but why they don't understand that Kamala could not. She was under strict orders of what she could say and what she could not say. She was still the vice president of the United States. So I don't understand why they couldn't understand that. Trump could say anything he wanted because because he wasn't president. He wasn't vice president. He was just somebody running for office. So he could say whatever the fuck he wants, and then everything that he promised, you see what happened. When he didn't shit. What? No, $5 trillion added to the deficit. That's what.
That's exactly the case. I learned that as a DNC member. When the president is a Democrat, the president runs the party, so everything is done from the president. You can't move without the president saying so. So yeah, exactly like you said, she can only do so much.
And not to mention, if a Democrat was to say half the stuff that Donald Trump said, they will not be getting a vote from their own party. And that's the truth.
Did y'all see what he posted in the chat? That Asian hate crime bill. Everything was just specifically for Asians as well.
Maybe we should tell him that we Asian in here. Maybe he should know that.
Like, I still can't believe that people are still talking about the Asian crime deal.
Because they don't understand it. And they think just because it says the Asian crime bill, that it wasn't for everybody. They don't read, they don't research, they don't understand. It's just ridiculous.
Well, what happens is they allow someone to tell them what they need to know versus going and doing their own research. So
But lady, we have for years told people the truth. And what I find so frustrating is that you see them in another room or another conversation and they would regurgitate the exact false point that you would correct it and provided evidence, a source to back up whatever your
no, we lost him. Internet broke. No, we lost him now. He sounded like he's going to the tunnel.
Yeah,
we kind of lost Patty too.
Yeah, I'm in a bad zone.
Right? Oh, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, I was saying that one thing that's so frustrating is that you meet certain people on this app and you have a conversation with them. You refute what they're saying, and you provide sources to back up whatever premise you. But then you sit in another room and they regurgitate the same shit that you would push back on, that you would debunk before. Like, apparently, they didn't learn anything new. That's, I find, to be the most infuriating part of having conversations with MAGA.
I think that's because you assume that they want to learn.
That's a good point. But what's preventing them from actually consuming new information?
They don't want new information. That's how demagoguery and ideologues work. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what proof you have. It was just like we were listening to something. I don't know if it was last night or this morning. And the guy said to the woman, he's like, I'm going to give you this data and these facts. And she said, I won't believe you. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? There are some of these people for whom spreading the idea is more important than understanding the implications of the idea or gaining information that may shift them off of the idea. You just have some ideologues. They stuck for whatever. And I just want to say this because I have a client that I just spoke to who screwed herself. by asking ChatGPT for advice. I'm like, no! For legal advice. Now I have to clean it all up. And it's going to take me a lot longer. Like, it's so hard to fucking undo a mess, right? I think a lot of people are relying on ChatGPT as accurate, and it's it's not accurate all the time. And please don't use it for legal advice. Oh my god, so annoying.
Man, that's wild. Yeah, the AI is hallucinated. It's a common occurrence, and yeah, people should know that. And yeah, exactly. Don't take advice. But ChatGPT told me I should spend more time on Clubhouse, so that's why I'm here.
But you guys saw this week there's a judge who censured a lawyer for using ChatGPT and submitting a docket with case law that doesn't exist, or a precedent that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's happened.
Made that shit up.
That's happened multiple times. Our lawyers have used ChatGPT, and it cites case law that doesn't exist.
It happened to one of Trump's lawyers. They caught it in one of his cases.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as like Wikipedia. Like you use that as a jumping off point for research. You don't use it as the end.
Yeah, it's just like
Exactly.
People talk about provide a source, and it's Wikipedia.
The only source on Clubhouse for me is Dr. A.G. I'll say, Dr. A.G. said,
and you are a wise woman, son.
that she's an encyclopedia and dictionary.
And now I'm an archive.
No, it just keeps growing. Hey, Quinn, what you doing, Quinn? Why you down there, Quinn? Where you at, Quinn?
That shit funny. Easy, and you know it's real sad because you
We listen and we don't judge. I got kids by my uncle. All three of his, and my baby daddy think the kids are his.
You see that video I sent you, Quinn? It was hours enough. No, I'm relieved.
Research, you don't use it as the end.
Resolution number 27.
Smash, Mary, Kill.
How much do you guys pay for rent in Chicago?
We don't actually rent it, we own it. With the HOA, we pay around $2,700.
Can I just tour your guys' apartment?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Welcome to my vintage apartment, built in 1920 by a female architect, Emma Kenneth. This is my hallway. This is my entryway. I wanted to always be like cozy and warm, so I have this bench, like decorative coffee books. That's a vintage art that I got from a vintage store. Beautiful art piece that represents my country. Welcome to the living room where me and my fiance and my little dog hang out alone.
I think that the idea of tenure should get thrown out of the fucking window. I think that if you're a bad teacher, it should be easier to learn. The fact that you're responsible for the education of the youth of this country, and you've got a job that it's one of the hardest to fire you, it's backwards. We should make it very easy to fire teachers.
No, I completely agree that we should make it easier to fire teachers, because I don't, in my opinion, I don't think your issue is necessarily that they're overpaid. I think their issue is that they're getting paid something that would be considered overpaid for people that don't have the skill set of what it should be to be an effective teacher. And because I feel like the majority of those competent teachers left after the pay. And when the kids started getting way fucking crazy, just like, yeah, I'm not getting paid not to deal with this shit. And they dipped out. And that was it. Those are the big teachers that we had. Like, they got pushed their fucking point after I don't know how long doing it. And then we had to get some shitty fucking replacements of just anybody we could find to make sure there's an adult in that classroom in some way, shape, or form. And then, yeah, it seems like they're being overpaid for the work they get put out because everybody fucking left because of the pay. And now we have the shit scrabblers that are there to work for I don't know what. Unless you get like a fucking, you know, a diamond in the rough like myself, and then you get someone who actually gives a shit about wanting to teach the kids and set them up for the future, right? You get half the people that are there just because they need some cash or part-time or want to be a substitute fucking teacher and then accidentally ended up staying in the classroom. So I don't think it's all completely on the teacher, especially when you have some parents that, as much as the teacher does teach well, as much as the teacher does do things in the classroom, as much as he does try to keep you engaged, they don't discipline their fucking kids. Their kids don't pay attention in class. They're super fucking disrespectful. When they get back home, they act out that same fucking disrespect they give to me to their parents. Those same parents don't do shit but kneel and bow the knee to their fucking child like they run the household and not them. So a lot of the time, well, I will say it's not like teachers have no fault in this whatsoever, because I completely agree. There's some of my coworkers that I don't think should be fucking teachers because they teach like shit, and I wouldn't want to be in that classroom. But at the same time, it's not like I can't also understand, like, hey, their classroom might be shitty, but you can't be a good fucking parent either. It goes on both ends. It starts at home and ends in the school. Both have responsibility.
Yeah, there's other problems with the education system. The fact that we have compulsory education, and in some states you refuse to allow parents to send their kids, direct their tax dollars to allow somebody to escape these failing schools and to be able to use those funds more wisely to put kids in an education modality that might be better suited to their kid. I'm a big believer in educational freedom. I think that you should, as a parent, be able to direct those tax dollars in any way you see fit to be able to deal with the education of your kids. But there's many people that disagree with this. What they prefer is that you trap people into failing schools. And you make it compulsory that the parent must send their kid to this failing school. And by the way, if you don't send your kid to the failing school, you can actually go to jail because education is compulsory. And so this this is the craziness that we have in this country, where we understand that the importance of education is going to impact our future, yet we allow our system to be erected in such a way that we almost guarantee that the system is going to fail. The higher education works really, really well. I think we still do a good job of educating people. But when the federal government got involved in that, the cost went up. You started paying for backing the loans. And when the government backs the loans for higher education, the lenders can give the money to anybody. It doesn't matter what their credit risk is. And if the person defaults on that loan, it doesn't matter. The lender's going to get it because the taxpayers are going to foot the bill. I think the entire education system, K through 12, as well as the university level, is broken fundamentally, and we need to fix it. But there's people that don't even want to have that conversation because they're too fixated on the idea of guarantee.
Mojo, would you say you're like laissez-faire capitalist, or what? Like, I guess what's your kind of compass?
Oh yeah, I am definitely a capitalist in its purest form. I would, if I had my way, I would the same way that you guys want to separate church and state, I would want to separate the market and state. I don't believe that the way that we allow government to interfere and put their hand on the scale of the market makes sense at all. In fact, I would completely privatize education if it were left up to me. The only thing that I think that the government should be spending taxpayer dollars on is to fund the military, fund police, and to fund courts. That's the extent of the government that I think we should pay for at the federal.
And I guess in terms of, I guess what I'm gathering from hearing you speak, because I've heard you speak a bit, but not like a ton, but I guess you're not necessarily looking for equality or even equity. You are more so looking for maximalization of profit and the freedom of a market to do that of its own, like however it wants to do it.
Well, first of all, that's a good catch. I don't believe in equality. I think it's an illusion. Milton Friedman said that if you put equality in front of liberty, you get neither. But if you put liberty in front of equality, you get heapings of both. I think he's right about that. I think we should recognize that people are not equal. The knowledge, skill, and ability of the people on this stage are all very different. And I think we should factor that in. The only thing that we should be focused on when it comes to being equal is equal protection under the law. And I think when people are fighting for equality of outcomes or even equality of opportunity, they're actually disregarding and fighting against the notion of equal protection under the law. Fundamentally, I believe that the best system that we could have is one where you're free to succeed or to fail. The one thing I would disagree with is you said that the focus should be on profits. That's the goal for business owners, is to be profitable. But my concern is more on the freedom to allow businesses to fail or succeed. If they're profitable, it's because they ran a good business. If they fail, then so be it. That's part of the process also. I definitely don't think that you should be guaranteed a fucking profit. I think you should have to work for that.
Definitely. And then the last thing, because that gives me a good idea, and it just frames, further future questions. The last thing, when you say, when you talk about how, the separation of state and market, I guess, kind of what comes up in my head is, before we had certain laws, there were things that I think were objectively bad, like having children working in coal mines and that sort of conditions. So I think that I view at least some level of state intervention as necessary. What's your kind of stance on that side?
I think understanding that the harm reduction is what we should be aiming for. Some child labor laws are written ridiculously. While I don't don't think kids should work at a coal mine. You have to think about, at a time, my grandfather who raised me worked at a coal mine when he was a child, in the state of Colorado. And the economic conditions were such where he and his brothers needed to find employment. They quit school to go find employment, and the only place that was hiring was the coal mine. And so when the alternative is that you starve or the kids go find a way to make money, I would love to see a world in which kids don't have to do that. But what we've done is, in this overzealous, we can't have children working, we're now preventing somebody that, let's say, owns a floral shop from teaching their kid the family business, for example. And I don't think that there's a harm in letting a child learn how to trim flowers, for example. And so I think there's different labor that you can put kids at. I certainly am not an advocate for children, going into diamond mines. I'm not a supporter of that. But I also think that blaming the state for the lack of regulation is not really addressing the problem in the first place. The first thing that I would look to is, where were the parents that allowed their kid to go and work in the coal mine, and what were the parents doing? And then if their circumstances was so dire that working in the coal mine was actually going to improve the quality of their life, I think it would be immoral for the government to intervene in that.
I'd like to hear your position on power, away from the capital, the money, paychecks. What forces are in play that gives the powerful, say, a business owner, to make 400 times what his employee makes with let's say their staff is 10,000. How does that make sense that people just bow down like that?
Well, why would we ever want to put a cap on what somebody,
in comparison to what they pay
I
somebody?
mean, I can answer that, because when that's kind of the inherent issue, is when you have one person or this very small group of people. And I'm not talking about small businesses, of course, but if you have a huge corporation, and the CEO is able to basically give themselves kind of whatever, and they're the business is successful, there's nothing stopping them from more equitably sharing those profits that business has made. I think in that sense, it's not that I'm advocating for a cap on what they can make. I'm more so advocating for a cap in the ratio, because the argument that people make is okay, if you're a CEO, you've got all this expertise, you know what it takes to run the business. I totally agree. People have no idea what goes into run, especially a really, really big company. So I'm with that, but is one person working 4,000? Are they 4,000 times working that much harder, 10,000 times harder? I mean, there should be some sort of
Well, if somebody builds a business that allows them to hire employees, and employment is a two-way street. I put out a job rec, you apply to it, you come and interview for it. Typically, you'll comb your hair nice, you'll shave, and you'll put on your Sunday best, and you'll say, I want this job, knowing what the pay is. Nobody's asking you to work for nothing. In fact, they're not grabbing people with a net off the street to come work for them. People are coming to that business and saying, that job that you need done and the pay that you offer, I would like that. And so that's a contract. And so when the employees are applying for those jobs, and the prices are set based on the value of the work that gets done. And again, that value is not based on how much profit the business makes. It's based on how easily replaceable you are. If you're a warehouse a worker, or you're a driver, it's not to say that the work that you're doing isn't physically demanding. It just means that there's a lot of people that could do physically demanding work, or that they could drive the vehicle. All they need is a clean driving record. And we can get them to do that. If you can use GPS and you can unload the truck and you're physically capable of doing that, there is a lot of people that can do that. And just the fact that you have the job doesn't mean that you're entitled to the money that the company makes. Where I think that we would find some common ground, and I think a better thing to look at is the role that government plays in these businesses. What you guys are asking for, it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is some sort of regulation. You talk about ratios between C-level pay and the worker bee pay. I would rather have the government out of that, and I would also like the government to not provide subsidies to these businesses. I would also like to make sure that the taxpayer dollars are not going to bail out failed companies, especially in the banking sector, where when the bank is failing, we do a wealth transfer from the taxpayers to the banks because the banks were in quote-unquote crisis, and then the money that was given to them by the taxpayers, they then used to pay bonuses to the executives. There's definitely some obscene things that go on in corporations. There's no doubt about it. But from my vantage point, all of those obscenities that we see come from the fact that the government has an unhealthy relationship in the business sector. They create regulatory agencies that provide favor to specific companies within certain industries. They deem that some companies are too important to fail. And they invest in them in the beginning, they invest in them in the middle, and even if the business fails, they give them more money. I think all of that should stop. I don't believe that the government should be giving these handouts. What we have today is exactly what Benito Mussolini envisioned in Italy. The idea of corporatism, the unity of government and corporations. So I think that I have a lot of smoke for corporations. I just point it in a different direction. The solution that it seems like you guys are asking for is for the government to get more involved. I'm suggesting that the government should not be.
No, that's actually pretty interesting because one of my core issues with capitalism is I've talked to a few people about this, and I don't think I've seen anyone really give me an example or breakdown of how it doesn't lead to corporatism, because naturally what's going to happen is certain companies will outperform others. I'm totally in agreement. We're not equal. Some people are going to do better. That's just a fact. Which isn't a problem, but then what ends up happening is once you get to a certain size, then you can start doing things like, buying out the competition, or, if it's really that dirty of a game, you can kill off the competition, or you can buy politicians. The reason that we have this deep, because I agree, honestly, a lot of what you said, I don't fundamentally dislike. I don't think anything you said is false. I think, we're seeing it different ways, but I agree, there's too much of that, but I think that's intentional. It's as a result of these corporations and kind of, super PACs, all that sort of thing. You get these very large sums of money between very few people, and then they use that money to influence the government and actually, effectively give both the government and by extension themselves more power. So how do you have a capitalist system that doesn't lead to?
I think it's very simple. The distinction of a corporation doesn't even need to be made. In my opinion, having a corporation is a recognized government distinction. If we just you don't need to be a corporation to be a company. And then when you structure as a corporation, you now have different government protections. I don't want the companies to be protected by the government. The only thing I want them to be protected from is overregulation. When I look at the biggest expansion in the U.S. economy, it was a time when regulation was very non-existent. From 1870 to 1900, you saw the Industrial Revolution. We came out of we had slavery, then we go through Reconstruction, and then all of a sudden we deregulate the market, and economic expansion is better than it's been in the entirety of human history in a 30-year period. And then the response to that was that we saw, some companies made a lot of money. That made certain people very rich. Maybe we should put some regulations. And again, I'm going to be that guy. If you think about, some people that want total control of the market, and then there's somebody like myself that's saying very, very little, right? I'm a minimalist. I can make the argument for no interference at all. And there's going to be a meeting in the middle. I think what's happened is we've allowed the people that have scared people that these corporations are evil. And I don't think the corporations are fundamentally evil. I think it's the collusion between government and corporations that creates this problem. I cannot, for the life of me, and I challenge you guys, find one company in the entire history of the United States that became a monopoly in their industry without the assist of the government, without a subsidy or without regulatory favor or without some sort of infusion of cash or government contracts. Show me a company that became a monopoly that got there without the government's help. And that's the problem. You don't see organic monopolies because when the government stays out of it, we do have competition. And when we have competition, what we see is more efficiency, what we see is lower cost, and what we see is innovation. We see everything moves in the positive direction when we increase competition. And if you want to increase competition, you have to deregulate them.
That's definitely an interesting point. I think I'm going to have to look into that and see, because I definitely get what you're saying, and I can think of some examples as well. And really, I'm forgetting now, because I remember what was it, Ford versus Dodge, that kind of led to it was one of the foundational, I guess, legal outcomes that kind of led to the shareholder obligation thing. And I feel like, if I remember, there was even interference in that whole thing, where the government kind of effectively helped them in that sense. But anyway, no, that definitely makes sense. I think that is one of the issues, is the capitalism leading to corporatism, and I think that's the point that you've made. I can't really refute because I don't know. Without looking that up, I'd have to do some diving. But there's also the extraction. The other thing I wanted to touch on, and I think it was this MGK that was saying they do, bring 4,000 or 40,000 times more or whatever. I think this is where I guess me and the right fundamentally diverge, is because I don't think that that's possible. I do think that a person can probably, be 10 times better or 20 or maybe even 30 times. It can be some obscene number. Like if I was to play against LeBron James and you were to quantify how much better he is than me, I'm sure he's fucking 30, 40, 50 times better than me at fucking basketball. But could LeBron James beat 4,000 of me at basketball? No, I don't give a fuck. These be fucking LeBron James, bro. He's 4,000 of me. My point is, there gets to be a point where it's unrealistic to say that, just any ratio possible is quote-unquote fair. Because in order for that person to generate that much, even if they're doing everything right, even if they're a fucking great CEO and they're handling shit and they're a fucking genius, in order for that business to run, they are still utilizing the labor of other people. And I get what you're saying.
Dwight, here's the issue, right? If the government stayed out of this, imagine the government stayed out of this. And imagine, let's say, think of a big company, let's say an Amazon or a Google or just a big company, right? If a company was not paying their employees enough, right? company was just crushing it, the employees could go to work for a competitor. And if a competitor was, let's say, in second place, let's say there's a market where there's 4 players, right? Let's say there's 4 major players that could do a particular product or service, right? Like, that could realistically hit scale and do this. Let's say there's 4 players. If one was kicking everybody's ass, but was abusing their employees by not having the right work conditions, not paying them well enough, and the employees were upset about this, their competitors could go and find the most talented people amongst those employees and recruit them and pay them more and give them better benefits and better conditions. And by having the better people, you would innovate faster, you would make better products, you would be able to increase the value of what you're offering in the marketplace. And so I just have a hell of a lot more faith in the free market than I do in giving the decision making, because the question that you haven't answered is, if you think the CEO's ratio of pay is so out of whack with the employee, who do you think would make the most sense to have dominion over that company to say, moving forward, this is the cap? Who would you give the power to make those decisions? And where do they get the knowledge that they can intervene and make a decision on where that cap?
Yeah, I think that could be something that, and of course, where we also differ is I'm obviously, pro government involvement to an extent, although not to the extent it is now. You have laws and regulations in place where maybe it's a range. Maybe for a smaller business, ratio is like 9 to 1, or maybe if you have a business with 100,000 employees, maybe it's 100 to 1 or something like that. And we can have we have economists, we have people that are way smarter than anybody in this room probably, that know all kinds of shit that can be utilized to help inform these decisions so that the collective can make an informed decision.
So Dwight, why do you think it's important to compare the pay of these distinctly different jobs? Why do you think that's important?
What do you mean by that? Like different.
So let's talk Amazon, right? Well, just to give an example, you have Jeff Bezos has a lot of money. Amazon does a ton of different things. Started off very innocently enough as a online bookstore, for those that remember, and now they provide web services. They're hyperscaler that businesses build upon. And then they also have Prime Video. They also have a delivery service. Small business owners can use their platform to sell their products. Amazon also sells their own garbage. They do a lot of things. Which worker at Amazon do you think deserves a salary that is 1/9 of Jeff Bezos?
Like during the early times or now?
Now. Do you think that there's that warehouse work at Amazon should be more highly compensated than warehouse work, let's say, at some wholesale glass manufacturer for automobiles?
Well, yeah. If the company is worth a certain amount, I don't see a reason why you couldn't have it where there's and maybe for this example, we go with what you suggest, which is no minimum wage. But let's say even if there is, let's say there's a minimum amount that you have to pay people because, whatever, regulation or law, whatever. Okay, if you're at Amazon and the company is worth XYZ amount, well, the amount that the workers are able to be compensated can be scaled. And there's a lot of different ways you can achieve that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a ratio of, worker to CEO. It could be
Dwight, what about the incentive structure for the employees? If you've got a job, let's say as an entry-level warehouse worker in an Amazon warehouse, rather than soliciting that the government get involved and even out these ratios and take some of Bezos' pay and give it to the warehouse workers, what about the obtaining new skills and working in that warehouse. You go from lifting boxes to getting certified to drive the forklift, which is going to get you an increase in pay. You stick around, you get your cost of living adjustment. Maybe you're such a hard worker that they recognize you and they make you a shift supervisor. Eventually, you might even be managing the entire warehouse. I would recommend that any worker always look at how do I increase my value to the company I'm working for, or improve my knowledge, skills, and ability to make myself more marketable to another company that might pay me better, rather than thinking, I don't think I make enough money. It's unfair that that guy has money. Maybe if the government got involved, I would have it better off. I think that you have far more control, and it's a much better system where you create incentives where the person that builds the best mousetrap and markets the mousetrap the best and sells the most of the mousetraps makes the most money. And the people that are helping them to manufacture it, to sell it, to distribute it, all of those things, they're going to get paid accordingly for the knowledge, skills, and ability they have. And so the incentive that you have is to just obtain the most marketable skills, the skills that pay the best.
Yeah, that was fun.
If you want to make Jeff Bezos money, then what I would suggest is that you go and innovate something and start a business and scale it the way that Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, no, that would still apply. Like your pay would be based on your value to the company still. It just wouldn't be such a vast difference where you can have, one or two people taking such a high percentage of so many people's labor, paying them.
Why do you care?
Because to me, that would make more sense as far as one, an equitable society, two.
But hold on, who said an equitable society is fair? The whole notion of equality is unfair. If you want people to be treated equal, in order to do that, you have to put your hand on the scale. How is that fair to the business owner?
Right, and that's why I say equitable, not equal. Because I agree. Like equality is just not achievable. I don't think even if we want to.
Right, really quickly. I want to ask you, actually not even ask a question, I'm just going to make a statement. Oftentimes I hear the arguments similar to yours coming from, I think it's a good place, but it's possibly misinformed by the idea that there is like a pie out there that is the money that can be divided up between people, and the more the haves can somehow gain, the less the have-nots have access to. But it's not the case. It's just not the case at all. The pie can be made larger and larger, and oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the compensation you're talking about, and that, you're skeptical of, which again, I understand if you're looking at it as a fixed, amount of resources. But what you have is a Jeff Bezos type who actually makes the pie so much bigger. And if under those circumstances, I'm just curious, but again, I'm not going to ask if that would change the way that you see this at all. Perceiving that income as a resource is not limited to one pool that can never grow or shrink. It's actually quite the opposite. Shrinking would be devastating, and so having these decisions in the wrong hands would have some really terrible outcomes. You're already skeptical of government interference in the way that impacts our markets and how these corporations operate. And so I'm just curious, thinking about that pie shrinking, since it is not fixed, and knowing that government influence can have negative impacts on why you would want more, because you've already agreed that yes, you appreciate regulation, but you don't like some of the outcomes of it, and see if in fact a Jeff Bezos type or someone in a position like that can actually make the pie much bigger, so that there is actually more pie to go around. How it shifts your calculus. Again, you don't have to answer it. It's more of like a thought experiment.
Yeah,
because I feel like you're coming from a fixed pie place.
I definitely don't view it as fixed, and in fact, basically, like if the Federal Reserve, right, wants to increase the amount of money in circulation, they do. I forget the exact product. Like this is stuff like I am familiar with, but I don't.
Hold on. That's so we're talking.
Familiar enough with it.
But hold on, just a second. Hold on. Before you start doing this, like I don't want you to bring the Federal Reserve into it because we're talking about. Like if we just keep using Jeff Bezos, we're talking about an individual who innovates into a market which was it was book selling, and I remember being so excited because I was able to spend much less on books in college at the time. Anyway, we're talking about someone who is actually providing a good or service that people need, and that's what needs the income that can eventually go around as it is today. We're not talking about printing money.
Well, what I'm saying is, when the pie expands, because you're talking about like production, but yeah, when the pie expands, both in terms of printing money and in terms of production, it still doesn't increase for the workers proportionately. Like that's why things are less affordable now. Like even when you account for inflation, things are less affordable now.
Can't get in there. I'm blind.
For